Okay, step two on the melody assignment is to start writing some melody and drum parts. Okay. Um, here's where I'm gonna kind of start to maybe drag some things around a little bit. I want to use this bass part and this chord progression for my first melody that I'm gonna write for the demo. First of all, let's look at the chord progression because that's kind of where this all started. The chord progression is 4 bars long. It's really basic because it's just these longer kind of chords that last a whole measure. My bass part had a little bit more movement, quite a bit. Mostly roots and fifths, just like a good bass part does. Couple looks like no passing tones at all. Awesome. So really straightforward on this one. Let's talk about writing a bass or a drum part for this that works with everything. So I'm going to click on my MIDI clip here. And first of all, it would make sense to change the loop length to 4 because I'm writing it for a 4-bar chord progression and bass part, right? But it might be repeating in smaller chunks than that even. I'll show what I mean in just a minute. So let's change my grid to 1/8. And it's been a couple weeks, but if you remember when we first were writing our drum parts, I taught you one called Boots and Cats, right? Which just kind of alternates kick patterns like this. And then the snare happens on the in-between beats, on the back beats, using some of those terms we've talked about in the previous lessons, beats 2 and 4. And then they had like a closed hi-hat thing that kind of just came on every beat. So that's a Boots and Cats. Simplest basic drum part out there, but also, really common, and it works with a lot of things. Let's just see what that sounds like with everything right now. So it's boring, but it's something, right? So let's talk about starting with something really basic like this, but then building, and making it work together a little bit more. The first thing I want to do is I want to sync up some of my kick hits with the bass hits because I think that makes them stronger, and I really like to hear the kick and the bass kind of line up with each other. And so let's just look and see where I have my kick hits. I mostly have them on beat 1, so that's good, right? This one goes like beat 1, beat 2, and then the and of 4. So if I come into my drum part and I change, so I've got like beat 1, beat 2 is the snare, so that's kind of lining up with the other hits, so I'll keep that. But I've also got that extra bass note on the and of 4, which is right before we come to the next measure. So I'm going to put an extra kick right there, and that I think will help kind of make that bass note stand out a little bit more, right? Same thing when we get to here. I've kind of made a variation on the bass line here. So instead of beat 1 and beat 2, it's beat 1 and then the and of beat 2. And so I'm going to come back to my drum part here, and I'm going to make that change. So I could either just move this snare over. That could be a cool thing. Or I could leave the snare right where it is and put an extra kick right there. So those are some things to try. And again, my goal here is not to perfectly have every single hit in my drum set line up with my bass, but just to have like some of these key moments really line up, right? Same thing happened here. I moved the bass to like the and of 2, right? So let's do that on beat 3 here too. Let's try that one where we move the snare over. Just see how that works out. And then finally, in the last measure, I've got again kind of the and of 2 and 3, and then the and of 4 on that root note, right? And so I'm going to try and do something similar with my kick right there, just adding in those things, right? So let's see what that does, and just see if that helps make the drums and bass kind of work together a little bit better. Cool. I'm actually really liking that a lot. One thing that I kind of want to do is I want to speed up those hi hats and or hi hat hits and maybe throw in a couple of that open hi hats. To do that, I'm going to switch my grid to 1/16th. And I'm going to select all of my hi-hat hits just like that, and I'm going to shorten them all up, and then I'm going to put an extra hit in between each of these, and I'd want to do an open one kind of like at the last one of each cycle there. Let's see what that does for us. Cool. I'm digging it. The only thing I think we need now is some kind of fill right here that kind of wraps up this 4-bar sequence, and then a lot of times I like to start like a beat one with like a longer cymbal sound. So the fill is going to kind of in a way like wrap up on that big cymbal hit. You see these 3 hits kind of all happen at the same time. So I'm going to, let's kind of get rid of some of our last little bit here. Remember that drum fill thing that we did before where we like used some of our other sounds like maybe the toms. And maybe just like some double snare hits and stuff like that. I'm gonna try and do like a, you know, like a maybe a Phil Collins kind of thing. The tom roll, right? And then we'll end on a snare and ooh, claps actually. That happened by accident, but I kind of like it. And then let's do hi-hat close. Let's see what that fill sounds like. Cool. I like it. You know, feel free to kind of mess around with that, but I think it's a good idea to put a fill at the end that kind of breaks up the monotony of the beat. Even though we did some changes as it goes through, I think this will kind of help cycle it through better. So cool, we've got a drum part. So let's go ahead and name this drums 1. Cool. And now, you know, if you're working with 2 chord progressions, you'll want to do a drum part for your second chord progression. Maybe copy and paste this one and just make some changes to it. That's up to you. So the next thing is writing some melodies.